Located in central Wisconsin, the Wild Rose Fish Hatchery sits just outside of the historic town of Wild Rose. First built in the early 1900s, Wild Rose was chosen as the hatchery location because of the abundance of artesian flow, where the hatchery could take advantage of the source of cold, natural spring water. In the early 2000s, the hatchery underwent 2 phases of construction and was renovated into the hard-working hatchery it is today. There are basically 2 hatcheries at Wild Rose, a cold water hatchery and a cool water hatchery. The cold water hatchery is on the west side of Highway 22, and the species raised there are Chinook salmon, coho salmon, rainbow trout, and brown trout. On the east side of the highway is the cool water hatchery, where muskellunge, northern pike, lake sturgeon, and walleye are raised. The key to the success of any fish hatchery is the location and quality of the water supply. The Wild Rose Fish Hatchery is equipped with 6 high-capacity wells. There are 4 wells that supply the cold water hatchery and 2 wells that supply the cool water hatchery. Together, they're capable of pumping up to 5,000 gallons of high-quality water per minute. The water that is pumped out of the ground is a consistent 49 degrees all year and is perfect for cold water fish culture, which is where we are going to start our tour. Before anyone or anything can be brought into the hatchery, we need to consider the biosecurity. Biosecurity refers to steps we take to keep viruses and bacteria out of the hatchery. We practice this by setting up checkpoints at every door, where employees must disinfect their boots and use hand sanitizer. Now that we've been properly disinfected, let's go into the building. There are 3 main areas within the cold water building: the biosecurity chamber, the heath incubators, and the start tanks. When the eggs first arrive at the hatchery, they are brought into the biosecurity chamber. The biosecurity chamber is used to disinfect the eggs using iodine. This kills any viruses or bacteria that may be on the eggs before they can be brought into the heath incubators. Once the eggs have been disinfected, they can be put into the heath incubators. Wild Rose has 40 vertical incubators where the eggs are incubated on well water, which is a constant 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Each incubator has 16 trays, where water starts on the top tray and flows down to the trays below. Each year, 4 to 5 million eggs start their journey at the hatchery in these heath incubators. After about 30 days, the eggs reach a point where we must remove the bad eggs from the good ones using an automated egg picker. This picker has an electronic eye that senses the bad white eggs and removes them from the lot, leaving only the good eggs. After another week or 2 on the incubators, the eggs start to hatch on the trays. The eggshells that are left on the trays need to be removed, along with any unhatched eggs. Although the fry have hatched, they have not yet fully developed. Over the next 30 to 45 days, they will live off their yolk sac and become more active, and eventually start to swim. Once they get to this point, they will be moved from the incubators to the start tank for their first feeding. Before being stocked into the start tanks, the fry are taken out of the trays and cleaned once more. At this point, their yolk sacs are almost completely gone, and the fry will need to be fed a commercial pellet. After a few days of being in the tanks, they are considered feed trained and will all start to actively feed. The main purpose of the cold water building is to incubate the eggs and get the fish feed trained and feeding through the first few months of their lives. After that, the fish will be moved into the grow-out portion of the cold water hatchery. There are 4 large pavilions at Wild Rose that house 16 raceways. As we start to use these larger rearing units, we need more water. This ensures there is enough oxygen for the fish and that the flows are fast enough to flush out fish waste. After the water is used in one pavilion, it is reused again by the pavilion below it. We use the water 5 times before it gets treated and discharged into the river. This helps reduce the amount of water that we need to produce 2 million fish annually. Before we stock any fish, we need to make sure they are healthy and disease-free. Fisheries veterinarians are on hand to examine the fish and take samples to test for pathogens. This is done to make sure we are not endangering the fish populations in the waters where these fish will eventually call home. Once the fish have a clean bill of health, we seine them from the raceway, load them onto a truck, and safely stock them around the state. We're going to start our journey on the cool water side the same way the fish do, in the cool water building. The cool water building is divided into 4 different areas: the biosecurity chamber, the incubation area, start tanks, and grow-out tanks. Cool water fish species incubate in much shorter periods and at warmer temperatures than cold water fish. We can incubate cool water eggs anywhere from 49 to 70 degrees, depending on the species and stage of development. We incubate the cool water eggs in a McDonald jar, where the water upwells through the eggs and keeps them at a gentle roll. Once the fry hatch, they are brought to the start tanks, where they will become feed trained, similar to the cold water fish. Cool water species need temperatures between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit to grow well, which means we must heat the water. The only way this is economical is by using a recirculating aquaculture system, also referred to as an RAS, which reuses 95% of the water, reducing the amount of water that needs heating. An RAS works by first passing the water over the fish. As the water passes through the fish tanks, the fish consume the food and oxygen that is in the water, all the while excreting feces, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. First, the water is passed through a drum filter that catches the solid waste products and removes them. The water then passes through the biological filter, which contains billions of nitrifying bacteria, whose job is to convert ammonia to nitrate. The biological filter also has aerators in it that remove the carbon dioxide produced by the fish. After passing through the biological filter, the water enters a pump that pushes it through an ultraviolet sterilizer, which kills bacteria and fungus. Once the water passes through the UV sterilizer, it is pushed up to the vacuum degasser, where oxygen is added back to the water. The water is then collected in the head tank, and from there the reconditioned water will recirculate back to the fish, and the process will repeat all over again. After the fish are feed trained in the start tanks, they are moved to the larger grow-out tanks. As the fish grow, we need to thin, sort, and move them within the cool water building to keep them from getting too crowded. The lake sturgeon are fed a combination of live and frozen food, such as krill and bloodworms. The muskie, northern pike, and walleye that are raised in the cool water building are fed a similar commercial pellet as the cold water fish. A portion of the fish that are raised in the cool water building are stocked into the wild, while others are stocked into ponds and fed live minnows before they are harvested and stocked out. Moving to the other aspect of cool water fish culture, Wild Rose has 14 rubber-lined ponds that are used for cool water fish. They are filled with well water from the wells on the cool water side of the hatchery. The 2 species that are reared in these ponds are walleye and muskie. Fathead minnows are brought in from minnow farms in Arkansas, as well as from the pothole prairie ponds of the Dakotas, and stocked into our cool water ponds for the fish to eat. Thousands of pounds of forage are brought in each week to feed the muskie and walleye. The minnows are tested and certified clean before they are allowed into the hatchery, to make sure that we are not putting our fish at risk of any pathogens. The minnows are loaded before sunrise and are driven to the hatchery and are swimming in ponds shortly after lunch. As the summer progresses, we sample fish to see how they are growing. A seine is pulled through the pond to catch a couple dozen fish that are placed into a bucket. From there, we measure and weigh the fish to record their growth, as well as observe the fish for overall condition and health. Every year, fisheries biologists request fish for their counties by submitting stocking quotas. We use these data to know how many fish we need to produce and the locations of their final stocking destination. Once the fish are the appropriate size and water temperatures cool in the fall, the ponds are harvested. Fish are collected by seine and loaded onto a distribution truck. For harvesting the muskie, we carry nets of fish to the top of the pond where we count each fish before they go onto the truck. Being popular with many anglers and also the state fish, muskie often receive passive integrated transponder tags, or PIT tags. Each PIT tag has a number that is recorded once it has been inserted into the muskie. The fish receives a fin clip so that when the fish is caught in the wild years later, we know that it has a PIT tag. The fish can then be scanned for a PIT tag number, which will provide us with information like the age of the fish, as well as the date and location where the fish was stocked. When we harvest our walleye ponds, we have a fish pump that does the heavy lifting for us. The walleye are loaded into a hopper in the pond, and a pump lifts the fish up the side of the pond, and they are sent to a dewatering tower. The water that is carrying the fish falls through the grates while the fish slide down the bars. When the walleye make it to the end of the dewatering tower, they drop into a pipe that slides the fish into the distribution truck. Once the truck is loaded with fish, they are stocked into their requested water. Each year, over 150 truckloads of fish leave Wild Rose and are taken to every corner of the state. Since 2010, the Wild Rose Fish Hatchery has stocked fish in 59 of the 72 counties in Wisconsin. Nearly all of the cold water fish are stocked into Lake Michigan, while the cool water fish are stocked into both Lake Michigan and inland waters. Stocking is part of an integrated approach to managing a water body. It helps ensure the protection of self-sustaining fish populations. Through stocking, we hope to increase specific fish populations so they can eventually sustain themselves through natural reproduction. We also stock fish so anglers can catch them. We stock smaller fish in the hopes that they will one day grow and eventually contribute to a water's adult fish population. But we also stock larger, legal-sized fish in put-and-take fisheries, so anglers can catch and harvest these fish immediately. Whether the goal for stocking is to help restore fish populations or to make more fish available for anglers to catch, our hope is that the fish we raise at Wild Rose and that are eventually stocked into our waters will not only survive, but thrive to make Wisconsin's fishing better.